When Samuel Cross saw the woman stepping down from the Kansas Pacific Railway that scorching afternoon, the world stopped turning. 18 years had carved lines into both their faces, but he'd know those eyes anywhere, the same green that had reflected summer stars the night they first kissed by a Tennessee creek. His heart surged with impossible hope until she spoke three words that shattered everything. "I'm getting married." Elena Hale hadn't come back to him. She'd come west to marry a stranger, and Samuel was about to watch the only woman he'd ever loved walk into another man's life. If you want to see how fate tears two hearts apart and forces them back together across 18 years and 1,000 miles of heartbreak, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far Samuel and Elena's story travels. The heat rose in waves from the Kansas dirt, turning the afternoon into something shimmering and unreal. Samuel Cross stood in the meager shade of the depot's overhang, his hat pulled low, watching the train exhale steam like a dying beast. He hadn't planned to be here. He'd come to Abilene for fence wire and salt, nothing more. But something, instinct, fate, the devil's own timing, had pulled him toward the station just as the 247 from St. Louis came rattling into town. Passengers emerged in clusters, a banker in a pressed suit, two farm families with children clinging to their skirts, an old man who needed help with the steps. Samuel barely saw them. His attention had snagged on something else entirely. A woman in a gray traveling dress stood on the platform, one gloved hand gripping a worn carpet bag, the other shielding her eyes from the sun. She was thinner than he remembered, her shoulders carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. But the curve of her jaw, the way she tilted her head to survey the strange town, these were burned into his memory like a brand. His breath caught. The fence wire fell from his hand, clattering against the dirt. It couldn't be. She turned and the world collapsed to a pinpoint. Green eyes. The same green that had haunted him through 2 wars, 4 states, and 18 years of trying to forget. The same green that had looked up at him by a Tennessee creek when they were barely more than children, when he'd kissed her for the first time and promised her everything young fools promise when they believe the world is kind. Elena. He didn't mean to say it aloud. The name scraped out of him like something pulled from a wound. She went rigid. For 3 heartbeats, she didn't move. Then slowly, she turned fully toward him, and he watched recognition flood her face. Shock. Then something that might have been joy, then something else entirely. Something that looked like grief. "Samuel?" Her voice carried across the platform, softer than the wind but cutting through every other sound. "Samuel Cross?" His legs moved without permission. He crossed the dusty space between them, and suddenly they were standing 3 feet apart, close enough to touch, separated by every year and mile that had carved them into different people. She was 34 now. He could see it in the fine lines around her eyes, the threads of silver and the dark hair pinned beneath her bonnet. But she was still Elena, still the girl who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and cried when he'd left for the war and written him letters that stopped coming after Shiloh. "I thought—" He couldn't finish. Thought what? That she was dead, married, lost to him forever? All of those things had seemed true for so long that seeing her here, solid and real, felt like touching a ghost. "I thought I'd never see you again." Her eyes glistened. "After the letter stopped, I thought, you stopped writing." The words came out harder than he meant. After Shiloh, there was nothing. Pain flickered across her face. "I wrote. Samuel, I wrote for 2 years. Every week, sometimes more. I sent them to every regiment, every hospital, every place they said you might be." The ground seemed to shift beneath him. "I never got them. I know that now." She looked away toward the depot where other passengers were greeting family, embracing, beginning their new lives. "My father told me you were dead, that he'd gotten word from the War Department. I was 17, Samuel. I believed him." The rage came sudden and clean. Her father, Charles Hale, who'd never thought a poor cowboy's son was good enough for his daughter, who'd smiled and shook Samuel's hand while planning to tear them apart the moment war gave him an excuse. "But you're here." He forced the anger down, tried to focus on what mattered. "You're alive. You came west." Something shuddered in her expression. "Yes." "Why?" Hope surged in his chest, desperate and foolish. "Elena, Why did you come to Kansas? She met his eyes, and he saw the answer before she spoke it. Saw it in the way her hand tightened on the carpet bag, in the resignation that settled over her like a veil. I'm getting married. 3 words. They hit him like bullets. You're... He couldn't make the words make sense. To who? A rancher. A widower named Thomas Brennan. He has land north of here, near Solomon. We've been corresponding for 4 months. 4 months. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. You've known him 4 months and you're going to marry him? It's not about time. She looked tired suddenly, older than 34. It's about need. His need and mine. What need? Elena, what happened? Where's your family? The pain that crossed her face made him wish he could take the questions back. Cholera. 3 years ago. Mother, father, my brother James, all in the same week. Her voice stayed steady, but he could hear the iron will it took. They left debts, more debts than I knew existed. The house went to the bank. Everything went. I've been working in Memphis, in a boarding house, trying to survive. Jesus. The word escaped before he could stop it. Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so damned sorry. Don't be. The debts are what they are. But a woman alone, Samuel, there are limits to what's possible, limits to what's safe. She straightened her shoulders. Mr. Brennan needs a mother for his daughters. 2 girls, ages 6 and 8. Their mother died in childbirth 2 years ago. He needs help with the house, the children, the endless work of keeping a homestead alive. And I need a husband. The bitterness in his voice surprised them both. Security, she corrected him gently. A roof. A life that doesn't mean washing other people's sheets until my hands bleed. Is that so terrible? Not if you love him. She looked away. Love is a luxury I can't afford. The words hung between them like smoke. Around them, Abilene carried on. A freight wagon rattled past. Someone laughed in the saloon across the street. The normalcy of it felt obscene. You don't even know him. Samuel heard the desperation creeping into his voice and couldn't stop it. You've never met him. What if he's cruel? What if he drinks? What if he works me to death? She met his eyes again, and the green was hard now, flint sharp. These are the gambles women make, Samuel. This is what we have. And Mr. Brennan's letters have been kind. His references speak well of him. That's more than many women get. That's not enough. It's what there is. She said it simply, factually, and somehow that made it worse. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she deserved more than what there is, wanted to fall to his knees right there in the dust and beg her to choose something different, choose him. But he'd lost that right 18 years ago when he'd ridden off to war believing they'd have forever to make things right. When? The question came out rough. The ceremony is Friday, 3 days from now. Mr. Brennan is coming to town to collect me. We'll marry at the church, and then... She gestured vaguely northward. Then I become Mrs. Thomas Brennan and begin whatever life that means. Friday, 3 days. Where are you staying until then? The hotel, the Drover's Rest. Mr. Brennan arranged it in his letters. Samuel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His mind raced, trying to find something, anything that would change this. But what could he offer her? A small spread outside town, barely profitable. A cabin that needed work. The life of a man who still woke some nights reaching for a rifle that wasn't there, fighting battles that had ended 15 years ago. What was that compared to security? To a real home, established land, children who needed her. I should go. Elena's voice pulled him back. The hotel clerk will wonder, and I have things to prepare. Elena Hoots? Please. She said it softly, but he heard the plea beneath it. Please don't make this harder. Seeing you here, it's... Her voice caught. I thought I'd buried this. I thought I'd made peace with how things were. Don't ask me to dig it up again. He wanted to. Wanted to rip open every scar and force her to feel what he felt. The wrongness of this, the waste. But she was right. What good would it do? She'd made her choice. Life had made it for her. I'm sorry, he said finally, for asking. For all of it. Something like tenderness softened her expression. She reached out, and for a moment he thought she might touch his face. But her hand stopped short, hovering in the space between them before falling back to her side. "I'm glad you survived the war," she said. "I'm glad you're here, in Kansas, making a life. That's something. It has to be something." Then she turned and walked toward the hotel, her carpetbag swinging at her side, her gray dress collecting dust from the street. He watched her go, watched her climb the hotel steps and disappear into the shadowed doorway, and felt something inside him tear clean through. For 18 years, he'd carried her memory like a stone in his chest. Some days it was smooth, worn down by time and acceptance. Other days it was sharp, cutting into him when he least expected it. But always, it had been a memory. Something past. Something finished. Seeing her again had changed that. She wasn't memory anymore. She was real, alive, walking into a marriage with a stranger while Samuel stood in the street like a fool, holding fence wire and watching his second chance evaporate in the Kansas heat. He didn't remember the ride back to his place. The horse knew the way, carrying him through the familiar miles while his mind stayed trapped in that moment on the platform. Her eyes. Her voice. The way she'd said please, like she was holding herself together with pure will. His cabin materialized out of the prairie like something he'd imagined. Small, sturdy, built with his own hands over 5 years of hard work. It wasn't much, but it was his. A place to sleep, to eat, to exist between the work of keeping cattle fed and fences mended and the endless demands of trying to make something from nothing. He unsaddled his horse mechanically, going through motions his body knew by heart. Fed and watered the animals. Stacked the fence wire in the barn. Went inside and stood in the middle of the single room, staring at walls that suddenly felt too close. The bottle was in the cupboard where it had been for 3 months, untouched. He'd bought it in a weak moment, then refused to open it, some stubborn part of him insisting he was better than his father had been, better than the men who drowned their ghosts in whiskey. Tonight, he didn't care about being better. The first drink burned, the second less so. By the third, he could almost breathe again. He sat at the rough table he'd built last winter and let himself remember. Let himself go back to that creek in Tennessee, to the summer he was 16 and Elena was 15, and the world was still something they believed they could shape. She'd been wearing a blue dress. He remembered that. Remembered the way it brought out the green in her eyes, the way the fabric had clung to her when she'd waded into the water on a dare. They'd known each other their whole lives. His father worked her father's land. But that summer had been different. That summer, he'd started seeing her as something more than the girl who climbed trees and laughed at his stories. "Kiss me," she'd said, just like that. Bold as anything, standing knee-deep in the creek with the sunset painting everything gold. He'd been too surprised to move. "What?" "You heard me, Samuel Cross. Kiss me or admit you're scared." He'd kissed her, clumsy and nervous, their noses bumping, her hands cold from the water and pressed against his chest. It had lasted maybe 10 seconds. It had changed everything. After that, they'd been inseparable. Stolen moments between his work and her lessons. Plans whispered in the dark. Promises made with all the certainty of young people who'd never known the world could break them. Then the war had come. Fort Sumter. Then the call for volunteers. Then his father telling him real men didn't hide while others fought. He'd enlisted in the Tennessee 6th Infantry, convinced he'd be back before harvest. Shiloh had taught him different, taught all of them different. The battle had been chaos. 2 days of smoke and screaming and mud mixed with blood. He'd taken a bayonet to the side, spent 3 months in a field hospital recovering, then been transferred to a different regiment when his own had been decimated. By the time he'd been able to send word home, everything had changed. No letters from Elena, no word from his family, just silence and the grinding continuation of the war. After Appomattox, he'd gone back to Tennessee, found his father dead from drink, his mother living with her sister in Chattanooga. Found Elena's family gone. Moved to Memphis, someone said. He'd tried to find her, written letters to addresses that went unanswered, asked everyone who might know. Nothing. Eventually, he'd stopped trying, took what little money his mother could spare and went west, following the promise of land and work and something that felt like a fresh start. He drifted through Missouri, spent 2 years in Colorado, finally settled here in Kansas on 160 acres of prairie that tested everything he had. And he'd survived. Built something. Not much, but something. Just not enough to offer a woman who needed security more than she needed the ghost of a first love. Samuel poured another drink and stared at the wall. 3 days until she married Thomas Brennan. 3 days until she became someone else's wife, someone else's salvation. 3 days to figure out if he was going to let her go. The decision made itself somewhere around midnight. He couldn't say exactly when. One moment he was sitting with an empty bottle, the next he was saddling his horse in the dark, his hands moving with purpose. He would see her, just once more. Not to change her mind, he wasn't fool enough to think he could offer what she needed, but to say what he should have said at the depot, to give her something better than his shock and his pain, to say goodbye properly instead of watching her walk away. The ride to town took an hour under stars so bright they hurt. Abilene slept, most of its buildings dark, only the saloon still showing light and leaking piano music into the street. Samuel tied his horse behind the hotel and stood in the alley, staring up at the windows, trying to remember which room might be hers. Then he saw her. She stood at a second-floor window, silhouetted against lamplight, looking out at the empty street. She'd unpinned her hair, and it fell dark and loose around her shoulders. Even from this distance, even in shadow, he could see the set of her shoulders, the way she hugged herself against some cold that had nothing to do with temperature. He should leave, should get back on his horse and ride home, and let her have her last few days of peace before her life changed forever. Instead, he picked up a pebble and threw it at her window. The first one missed. The second pinged against the glass. She startled, leaning forward, peering down into the darkness. He stepped into the moonlight where she could see him. Her hand went to her mouth. For a long moment, she just stared. Then she disappeared from the window. Samuel's heart hammered. Maybe she was getting the clerk. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe... The back door opened. She stood in the doorway in a nightgown and wrapper, her hair still loose, her feet bare. "Are you insane?" She whispered it fiercely. "It's after midnight. If anyone sees... I needed to talk to you." "We talked. At the depot, I didn't say what I needed to say." He took a step closer. "Please, Elena, just give me 5 minutes, then I'll go. I'll leave you alone. I promise." She hesitated, her hand on the doorframe, every line of her body tense with indecision. Then she sighed and stepped back. 5 minutes. In the alley, where we won't be seen. She closed the door. A moment later, she emerged again wearing a shawl over her nightclothes, her hair hastily pinned. She moved past him into the deeper shadows of the alley, and he followed. They stood beside a water trough, the moon painting everything silver and strange. "Talk," she said. "Say what you came to say." He'd planned this on the ride in, had the words arranged in his mind like a speech. But standing here, looking at her face in the moonlight, everything he'd prepared dissolved. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for today, for how I reacted. You came to this town to start a new life, and I made it about me, about what I lost. That wasn't fair." Her expression softened slightly. "Samuel, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "You were right about all of it. You need security, and I can't give you that. What I have isn't enough. It's barely enough for me most months. And you deserve better than another gamble. You've had enough of those." "Then why are you here?" Her voice was gentle but bewildered. "If you agree, why? Because I needed you to know that I understand." The words came faster now, like something breaking open. "I needed you to know that even though I can't give you what you need, what we had, what we were, that mattered. That it wasn't nothing. That 18 years in a war and all the distance in the world didn't erase it." Tears gleamed in her eyes. "Of course it mattered. How could you think—" "And I needed to tell you that I hope he's kind." His throat tightened. "This man you're marrying. I hope he's kind and decent and smart enough to know what he's getting. I hope he gives you a good life, Elena. I hope you find something that looks like happiness, even if it's not what we planned when we were kids who didn't know any better." A tear spilled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm so scared, Samuel. I've been pretending I'm not, but I am. I'm going to marry a stranger and live in a place I've never seen and raise children who don't know me, and I don't know if I'm strong enough. You're the strongest person I've ever known, he said it with absolute certainty. You survived losing everyone. You survived alone. You'll survive this too. Will I? She looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her face nearly broke him. What if I'm making a terrible mistake? What if... Then you'll survive that too. He wanted to touch her, wanted to pull her into his arms and promise her everything would be fine. But that would be a lie, and she deserved better than lies. You'll survive because that's what you do. That's who you are. She nodded, but the tears kept falling. I wish things had been different. I wish my father hadn't lied. I wish the letters had found you. I know. He did reach for her then, couldn't help himself. Took her hand in his, felt the cold of her fingers, the way they trembled slightly. I wish all of it too. But wishes don't change what is. They stood there, hands linked, and let themselves mourn what could have been. Let themselves feel the full weight of it, the lost years, the stolen future, the love that had never gotten its chance. Finally, Elena pulled her hand away. You should go. Before someone sees, before we make this even harder. He nodded. Will you do something for me? What? Be happy. Or if you can't be happy, be at peace. Promise me you'll try. She smiled through her tears. I'll try. If you promise the same. Deal. He turned to go, made it 3 steps before her voice stopped him. Samuel? He looked back. Thank you. For tonight. For understanding. For everything. Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye. He rode home through the dark, and if he cried, there was no one to see it. The next day he stayed on his land, worked himself into exhaustion, mending fence line, moving cattle, chopping enough wood to last through next winter. Anything to keep his hands busy and his mind blank. Thursday, he rode into town for supplies. Told himself it was normal ranch business. Didn't admit even to himself that he was hoping for another glimpse of her. He saw her leaving the general store, carrying a package. She wore a different dress, pale green this time, and she was smiling at something the shopkeeper's wife had said. The smile looked almost genuine. Their eyes met across the street. She nodded, a small acknowledgement, then turned away. It was the right thing, the necessary thing. It still felt like dying. Friday dawned clear and hot. Samuel fed his animals, ate nothing, and sat on his porch watching the sun climb. Somewhere in town, Elena was putting on a wedding dress. Thomas Brennan was arriving to claim his bride. A preacher was preparing words that would bind them together. And Samuel was here, on his porch, letting it happen. By noon, it was done. She was married. Mrs. Thomas Brennan heading north to Solomon to begin a life that had nothing to do with him. He told himself to be glad for her. Told himself he'd done the right thing, the honorable thing, by letting her go. He was still sitting there when the sun set, trying to believe it. 3 days passed, then 4. He worked, ate, slept, worked again. Fell into the rhythm that had sustained him for 5 years. Told himself the hollow feeling in his chest would fade. On the 6th day, a rider appeared on his property. Young kid, maybe 15, looking nervous. You Samuel Cross? That's right. Got a message for you, from Mrs. Brennan. She said it was urgent. Samuel's heart stopped. What message? The boy handed over a folded piece of paper. She said you'd know what to do. Then he was gone, riding back toward town before Samuel could ask questions. With shaking hands, Samuel unfolded the note. The handwriting was rushed, barely legible. Samuel, I was wrong. About all of it. Please come. The cabin is 8 miles north of Solomon, near Eagle Creek. Please, I need you. E. He read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the words. She needed him. Had been married less than a week and was asking him to come. Something was wrong. Samuel was on his horse before he could think. Riding hard for Solomon, Elena's note clutched in his hand like a lifeline. The road north seemed endless. Every mile felt like 10. His mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. Was she hurt? Was Brennan cruel? Were the girls... He couldn't finish the thought. 8 miles north of Solomon, near Eagle Creek. He found the creek, followed it west until he saw smoke rising from a chimney. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by scrub oak and prairie grass. Modest but well kept, with a barn and small corral. Exactly the kind of place a working rancher would have. Samuel slowed his horse, suddenly uncertain. What was he doing? Riding to another man's home because his wife had asked? This was insanity. Then he saw her. Elena stood in the doorway, her hand shading her eyes, watching him approach. She wore a simple work dress, her hair pinned back, and even from a distance he could see the tension in her body. He dismounted, walked toward her slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to send him away. She didn't move, just watched him come closer, her expression unreadable. "You came," she said when he was close enough to hear. "You asked. I wasn't sure you would. After everything, I thought, what's wrong, Elena? Your note said urgent. Are you hurt? Are the girls? We're fine. Physically, we're fine." She glanced back into the cabin, then stepped outside fully, pulling the door closed behind her. "Thomas is in town. Won't be back until evening. The girls are with a neighbor. I made sure we'd be alone." "I don't understand." She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw what he'd missed at the depot. Saw the fear beneath the composure, the desperation beneath the strength. "I made a mistake," she said. "Marrying him, coming here, all of it. I thought I could do this, thought I could build a life on practicality and need, but Samuel, I can't. I can't breathe here. I can't." She broke off, tears spilling over. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me what happened." And there, in the shadow of another man's home, she finally did. Elena's voice shook as the words began to spill out, each one carrying weight she'd been holding alone for 6 days. "The first night he barely spoke to me, just showed me where things were, the kitchen, the girls' room, the bed we were supposed to share." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He was polite, formal, like I was a housekeeper he'd hired, not a wife he'd married hours before." Samuel felt his jaw tighten, but said nothing, letting her continue. "The girls were terrified. Sarah and Emma, they hid behind the furniture when I tried to talk to them, and when I asked Thomas how to reach them, he just said they'd adjust. The children always do." Her eyes met his. "But Samuel, they're not adjusting. They're shrinking. Sarah hasn't spoken a word since I arrived. Emma cries in her sleep. And Thomas, he doesn't notice, or he notices and doesn't care." "What do you mean?" "He's not cruel, not exactly. He doesn't hit them or yell, but he's absent even when he's present. He works from dawn until dark. Comes in for meals I cook, speaks maybe 20 words total, then falls asleep in his chair. The girls might as well be ghosts for all the attention he gives them." She paced now, the words coming faster, like a dam finally breaking. "And the work, Samuel, I knew it would be hard. I expected hard. But there's no help, no one. Just me doing the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, the mending, trying to garden, trying to care for 2 traumatized children, all while Thomas acts like this is normal, like this is what I signed up for." "Did you tell him it's too much?" "I tried. The 3rd night I said I needed help with the girls, that maybe he could spend time with them, read to them, something. He looked at me like I'd suggested something obscene, said that was women's work. That's why he'd sent for a wife." Rage built in Samuel's chest, hot and sharp. "He treats you like a servant." "No." Elena's voice went quiet. "He treats me like a function, like I'm the cooking function and the cleaning function and the child-rearing function all wrapped into one body. I don't think he sees me as a person at all." The words hung in the air between them, terrible in their honesty. "There's more." She looked down at her hands. "Last night, he came to the bedroom. First time since the wedding night, when he'd been too tired to do more than fall asleep. He was drunk. Not falling down drunk, but enough that I could smell it. And he said it was time I fulfilled my other duty." Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "Did he hurt you?" "No, I told him I wasn't ready, that I needed time, and he just laughed. Said time didn't change what I owed him, that he'd paid for my train ticket, married me, given me a home, and payment was due." Her voice broke. "I locked myself in the girls' room, stayed there all night while he pounded on the door, saying I was being foolish, that I belonged to him now, whether I liked it or not." Jesus Christ. Samuel couldn't keep the fury from his voice. Elena, this morning he acted like nothing happened, made me cook his breakfast, told me he'd be in town today, and expected a proper supper when he returned. Then he left, and I knew I couldn't stay. Not another day, not another hour, so I sent for you. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and he saw the girl from Tennessee again. The one who'd been brave enough to ask for a kiss, bold enough to plan a future. Life had tried to beat that out of her, but it was still there, buried under layers of survival and compromise. I don't know what I'm asking, she said. I don't have a right to ask anything. You have your life, your land, and I'm married to another man. But Samuel, I can't do this alone. I can't. He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of it. He held her and felt his own rage crystallize into something clear and certain. You're not alone, he said into her hair. Not anymore. She pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes red and searching. What are you saying? I'm saying you're not staying here. You and those girls are leaving. Samuel, I'm married. Legally married. If I leave, then you leave. We'll figure out the rest later. He cupped her face in his hands, made her look at him. Elena, listen to me. This man doesn't own you. A piece of paper doesn't give him the right to treat you like property. If you want out, we'll get you out. Where would I go? I have no money, no family, nowhere. You'll come to my place, all three of you. It's not much, but it's safe, and it's far enough from here that he won't find you easily. Hope and fear warred in her expression. He'll come looking. He'll say I abandoned my vows, broke the law. They could force me back. Let him try. Samuel's voice went hard. I didn't survive 4 years of war to stand by while some bastard breaks a woman. He stopped himself. While someone hurts you, any of you. You do that? Risk everything for me? For children who aren't even yours? He thought about lying, about making it seem noble or selfless. But she deserved the truth. I spent 18 years trying to forget you, he said. Told myself you were gone, married, happy, somewhere I couldn't reach. Built a whole life around accepting I'd lost you. Then you stepped off that train, and every bit of that carefully constructed piece just crumbled. I can't lose you again, Elena. Not to this. Not when I can do something about it. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling now, tremulous and uncertain but real. You always were stubborn. So were you. Still are, I'm guessing. I want to say yes. Want to just pack up and run. But the girls, I barely know them, Samuel. What if they won't come? What if they're too scared? Then we convince them. He glanced toward the cabin. Are they really with a neighbor? She shook her head. They're inside. I lied in case Thomas came back early. I couldn't risk. She took a shaky breath. Let me bring them out. Let you meet them. She went to the door and opened it carefully, speaking soft words into the dim interior. After a moment, 2 small figures emerged, clinging to each other like sailors in a storm. Sarah, the older one, had her mother's dark hair and her father's sharp chin. She stared at Samuel with eyes too old for 8 years, wary and measuring. Emma was smaller, blonde where her sister was dark, with a gap-toothed smile she wasn't currently using. Both wore dresses that had been mended multiple times, and both looked like they expected the world to hit them. Samuel's heart cracked clean open. He crouched down, making himself less threatening, and waited for them to decide if he was safe. Girls, Elena said gently, this is Mr. Cross. He's an old friend of mine. He's here to help. Help with what? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but at least she'd spoken. Help get you somewhere better, Samuel said. Somewhere you won't have to be scared all the time. Papa says we're fine here. But Sarah's eyes told a different story. Your papa's wrong. He said it plainly, no sugarcoating. Children knew when adults were lying to them. This isn't fine, and you know it isn't. I can see it in how you're standing, how you're looking at me like I might hurt you. That's not how children should live. Emma made a small sound and buried her face in her sister's shoulder. Where would we go? Sarah asked. If not here. My place. It's about 20 miles south. Small cabin, some land, a few horses. It's quiet. Safe. And I promise, I swear on anything you want, that nobody will hurt you there. You don't know us. Sarah's voice carried the kind of bitterness that came from broken promises. Why would you care what happens to us? Samuel glanced at Elena, saw her barely holding back tears, then looked back at the girls. Because I know what it's like to be scared in your own home, he said quietly. My father drank. When he did, he got mean. I spent a lot of years trying to stay invisible, trying not to set him off. So yeah, I don't know you, but I know that feeling, and I know nobody should live with it. Something shifted in Sarah's expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. Would we have to call you Papa? She asked. You can call me Samuel, or Mr. Cross if you're feeling formal, or Hey You if that's easier. Whatever makes you comfortable. And Miss Elena? Elena knelt beside them. Whatever you want, sweetheart. I'm not trying to replace your mother. I'm just trying to help you find somewhere you can breathe again. Emma finally lifted her head. Can we bring Rabbit? Who's Rabbit? Samuel asked. Sarah held up a battered cloth doll, one ear missing, the stuffing coming out in places. Emma's. She's had her since she was a baby. Mama made her. Then Rabbit comes too, absolutely. The little girl's face lit up for just a second before fear clouded it again. Papa says Rabbit's dirty, says I should throw her away. Well, Papa's not in charge of Rabbit anymore, Samuel said. You are. And if you say Rabbit comes, Rabbit comes. Emma looked at her sister, a silent question passing between them. Sarah studied Samuel for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. Okay, she whispered. We'll go. Elena sagged with relief, but Samuel's mind was already racing ahead. Thomas would be back by evening. That gave them maybe 4 hours to pack what they could carry and put distance between here and Solomon. 4 hours to disappear before all hell broke loose. What can we take? Elena asked, reading his thoughts. What matters? Clothes? Anything of value you can sell later. Anything that belonged to their mother. He looked at the girls. Do you have things you want to bring? Things that are important? Sarah nodded toward the cabin. There's a box, under the bed. Mama's things. Papa never looks at it. Then that comes. Anything else? There's money, Elena said quietly. In a jar in the kitchen? Not much, maybe $20. Thomas keeps it for household expenses. Take it. You earned every penny cooking his meals and cleaning his house. It's yours. He stood up. I'll get my horse ready. You pack, fast as you can. We need to be gone before... The sound of hoofbeats cut him off. They all froze. Elena's face went white. That's him. That's Thomas. He's early. Samuel's hand went instinctively to his hip, but he hadn't worn a gun in years. Didn't matter. He put himself between Elena and the approaching rider, the girls tucked behind them both. Thomas Brennan came into view around the barn, riding a big bay gelding. He was a large man, thick through the shoulders and chest, with a weathered face and eyes that went cold when he saw Samuel standing in his yard. What's this? He dismounted heavily, his gaze moving from Samuel to Elena to the girls. Elena, who is this man? An old friend. Her voice was steadier than Samuel expected. He came to visit. Visit. Thomas said it like the word tasted bad. You've been married to me 6 days, and you're already entertaining men in my home? It's not like that. Then what's it like? He took a step closer, and Samuel saw Elena flinch, saw the girls shrink back. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is cavorting with some cowboy while I'm supposed to be in town. Watch your tone, Samuel said quietly. Thomas's attention snapped to him. Excuse me? I said watch your tone. The lady deserves respect. The lady is my wife. What she deserves is what I say she deserves. He turned back to Elena. Get inside, take the girls, I'll deal with your friend. She's not going anywhere. Samuel kept his voice level, but something in it made Thomas pause. None of them are. Understanding dawned slowly on Thomas's face, followed by ugly rage. You're trying to steal my wife. I'm helping her leave a situation that's not safe. Not safe? Thomas laughed, harsh and bitter. I gave her a home, married her legal, feed her, clothe her. That's more than some orphaned nobody from Memphis had any right to expect. You gave her a prison, Samuel said. Work without rest, demands without kindness, and last night you tried to force yourself on her when she said no. Thomas's face went purple. That's a lie. That's a goddamn lie. A wife doesn't get to say no. That's not how marriage works. Then you have a broken understanding of marriage. You sanctimonious son of a bitch. Thomas took another step forward. You think you can just ride onto my property and take what's mine? I'll have the law on you. I'll have you arrested for theft, for adultery, for what? Helping a woman who asked for help? Samuel held his ground. Go ahead, bring the law. Let's see what they say when they hear how you treat your family. I treat them fine. Better than fine. Those girls have a roof over their heads, don't they? Food in their bellies? That's more than their useless mother gave them before she died trying to birth another brat. Sarah made a small, wounded sound. Samuel felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest. You just showed your true self, he said quietly, talking about their mother like that in front of them. You're not a husband or a father. You're just a mean, bitter man who wanted servants, not a family. Thomas's hand dropped to the knife on his belt. Get off my land. Not without them. Then I'll make you leave. You can try. They stood there, two men measuring each other, violence hanging in the air like summer lightning. Samuel knew he was at a disadvantage, unarmed, on another man's property, legally in the wrong. But he also knew he wasn't leaving without Elena and those girls, whatever it took. It was Elena who broke the standoff. Thomas. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. I'm leaving. You can accept it or fight it, but either way, I'm going. This marriage was a mistake, for both of us. You don't get to decide that. But something in his voice had shifted, not softer, but uncertain. Yes, I do. I'm a person, not property. I came here in good faith, tried to make it work, but I can't live like this. Won't live like this. She straightened her shoulders. You can keep the dress you bought me, the ring, whatever money you think I owe. But I'm taking the girls, and I'm leaving. Those are my daughters. Those are two traumatized children who need more than you're giving them, who need someone who sees them as people, not obligations. And you think you're that someone? You've known them a week. I've known them long enough to see their suffering, long enough to want better for them. She looked at Sarah and Emma, still clinging to each other. I'm asking you, as their father, to let them come with me, to give them a chance at something better than this. Thomas stared at her, and Samuel saw something flicker in his expression. Not kindness exactly, but maybe a kind of tired recognition. Like he'd known all along this wasn't working, but hadn't wanted to admit it. If I let them go, he said slowly, I want it in writing, that you took them, that I didn't abandon them, so nobody can say I'm the bad one here. Fine. Elena's voice was firm. We'll write it up, sign it, whatever you need. And you, he turned to Samuel, you take responsibility for all three of them. Anything happens, anything goes wrong, it's on you, not me. Agreed. Thomas nodded slowly, then walked past them into the cabin. He came out a minute later with paper and a pencil, wrote something in rough block letters, then handed it to Elena. She read it quickly. This says I seduced you under false pretenses and stole your children. That's my terms. Sign it or stay. Samuel started to object, but Elena put a hand on his arm. It's fine. Let him have his version. It doesn't matter. She signed her name at the bottom, and Thomas folded the paper and tucked it in his pocket. Then he looked at his daughters, really looked at them, for what might have been the first time since their mother died. You be good, he said gruffly. Listen to Miss Elena. Don't cause trouble. Sarah nodded solemnly. Emma just stared. That's it? Elena's voice was incredulous. That's all you have to say to them? Thomas's jaw worked. What do you want from me? I'm letting them go, aren't I? That's more than most men would do. Most men would fight for their children, would want them, would... She stopped herself, shaking her head. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Girls, go get your mother's box. Quickly now. They ran into the cabin, and Samuel could hear them scrambling under the bed. Elena went to follow, but Thomas caught her arm. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Mark my words. You'll end up worse off than you were in Memphis, and you'll wish you'd stayed. She pulled her arm free. Maybe. But at least it'll be my choice to regret, not yours. She went inside and Samuel heard her moving quickly, gathering things. He stayed in the yard with Thomas, neither of them speaking, the tension thick enough to choke on. 5 minutes later, Elena emerged with a bundle of clothes and a small satchel. The girls followed, Sarah carrying a wooden box, Emma clutching Rabbit tighter than ever. "That's everything," Elena said. "We're ready." Samuel untied his horse. "It's 20 miles. Can the girls ride?" "Not well. We'll have to go slow." "Then I'll walk. Put Emma up front, Sarah behind her. You can ride behind them or walk with me." "I'll walk." She looked back at the cabin one last time, then turned away deliberately. "Let's go." They started across the yard, Samuel leading the horse with both girls perched nervously on its back. Elena walked beside him, carrying their meager belongings. "You're making a mistake," Thomas called after them. "All of you. That man can't give you what you need." Samuel didn't turn around, just kept walking, but Elena stopped, looked back one last time. "Maybe not," she called back, "but he'll try. That's already more than you ever did." Then they were moving again, away from the cabin, away from Thomas Brennan and his cold house and colder heart. The afternoon sun beat down on them, and the road stretched out long and dusty ahead. Nobody spoke for the first mile. The only sounds were their footsteps, the horses' hooves, and the wind moving through the prairie grass. Samuel kept checking on the girls, making sure they weren't slipping, that they were handling the ride. They clung to the saddle horn and each other, their faces solemn and watchful. It was Sarah who finally broke the silence. "Is he going to come after us?" Samuel considered lying, decided against it. "Maybe. I don't know. But if he does, he'll have to get through me first." "Are you very strong?" Emma asked in her small voice. "Strong enough. Stronger than Papa?" "In the ways that matter, yes." Elena looked at him over the girls' heads, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or trust. Or just the shared knowledge that they'd crossed a line and there was no going back. They walked in silence for another hour. The sun started its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Samuel's cabin was still 15 miles away, too far to reach before dark. "We'll need to stop soon," he said. "Make camp for the night. There's a creek about a mile ahead with some cover. We can rest there, start fresh in the morning." "Is that safe?" Elena asked. "Stopping out in the open?" "Safer than trying to navigate in the dark with two tired children." He glanced at the girls. "How are you two holding up?" "Hungry," Emma admitted. "Well, let's see what we can do about that." They found the creek where he remembered it, a thin ribbon of water running between low banks with a few cottonwood trees providing shade. Samuel helped the girls down from the horse, then started gathering deadwood for a fire. "I don't have much," he admitted. "Some jerky, a bit of hardtack, not exactly a feast." "It's more than we had an hour ago." Elena was already organizing their bundles, creating a small camp with practiced efficiency. "Girls, let's wash up in the creek, then we'll eat." They followed her obediently, and Samuel watched them splash water on their faces and hands, saw Emma finally smile when a minnow darted past her toes. Small moments, but they mattered. He got the fire going and laid out what food he had. It wasn't much, but they ate it grateful, sharing the jerky and passing around his canteen. As darkness fell, the girls started to droop, exhaustion catching up with them. "Time for sleep," Elena said gently. "Come here, both of you." She arranged their blankets near the fire, tucked them in with practiced care. Sarah settled quickly, but Emma clutched Rabbit and stared up at the stars with wide eyes. "It's scary out here," she whispered. "A little," Elena agreed. "But see those stars? Your mama used to tell me." She paused, glanced at Samuel. "Did she ever tell you about the stars?" Sarah shook her head. "Well, some people believe that when good people die, they become stars, so they can watch over the people they love, even from far away." Elena pointed up. "So maybe your mama's up there right now, watching you, making sure you're safe." "Really?" Emma's voice was hopeful. "I'd like to think so." They lay quiet for a while, and gradually their breathing evened out into sleep. Elena stayed beside them until she was sure they wouldn't wake, then came to sit by the fire near Samuel. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming." for not asking questions, for just helping. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You risked everything today. Your safety, your reputation, maybe even jail if Thomas decides to press charges. She looked at him across the flames. Why? Be honest. Why did you really come? He stared into the fire, watching the way it danced and shifted, never the same twice. Because 18 years ago I rode off to war and left you behind. Thought I was being noble, serving my country, doing what needed to be done. He poked at the fire with a stick. When I came back and you were gone, I told myself it was fate, that we weren't meant to be, that some things just don't work out. And I believed it. Built a whole philosophy around accepting loss. Samuel, let me finish. He looked up at her. Then you stepped off that train, and I realized I'd been lying to myself for 18 years. There was no acceptance, no peace, just a wound I'd gotten real good at ignoring. And when you sent that note, when you asked for help, I knew. I knew if I didn't come, if I let you go again, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering, regretting. And I'm tired of regret, Elena. So damn tired. She was crying again, silent tears catching the firelight. I don't know what happens now. I'm still legally married. I have no money. These girls barely know me, and I'm asking you to take on a ready-made family that isn't even yours. One problem at a time. He shifted closer, near enough to take her hand. Tomorrow, we get to my place. Get everyone settled and safe. Then we figure out the rest, together, like we should have done 18 years ago. What if Thomas comes? What if he brings the law? Then we deal with it. But Elena, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to get something from you. I'm not expecting... He struggled for words. I'm not Thomas. I'm not keeping score or demanding payment. If all you ever want from me is friendship and a safe place to live, that's enough. That's more than enough. She squeezed his hand. And if I want more than that? His heart stopped. Do you? I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure out who I am when I'm not terrified or exhausted or doing what everyone expects. But Samuel, when I'm with you, when I look at you, I remember what it felt like to want things, to hope for things, and I haven't felt that in so long. Then that's where we start, with hope, with possibility, with taking it one day at a time until we figure out what this is. She nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder. They sat like that, watching the fire burn down, listening to the girls breathe softly in sleep and let themselves imagine something they'd both given up on years ago. A future worth fighting for. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of morning that promised rain before noon. Samuel woke to find Elena already up, coaxing the embers back to life, her hair loose around her shoulders and her face drawn with exhaustion. She hadn't slept much, he could tell. Neither had he. The girls stirred as the fire caught, Emma making small, confused sounds before remembering where she was. Her face crumpled, and for a moment Samuel thought she might cry, but Sarah pulled her close and whispered something that made her nod and settle. We should eat and move, Samuel said quietly. Storm's coming, and I'd rather be home before it hits. They made a quick breakfast of the last of the hardtack softened in creek water, then packed up the camp. The girls were stiff and sore from yesterday's ride, moving like old women as they climbed back onto the horse. Samuel made a mental note to take it even slower today, give their bodies time to adjust. The first few miles passed in silence. The prairie stretched out around them, endless and indifferent, the grass bending in waves under a wind that smelled of rain and distance. Samuel kept checking the horizon behind them, half expecting to see Thomas Brennan riding hard with a posse, but there was nothing, just empty land and the occasional hawk circling overhead. It was Sarah who finally spoke, her voice carrying down from the saddle. Mr. Cross? Samuel, he reminded her. What is it? Where did you learn to fight? The question caught him off guard. What makes you think I know how to fight? The way you stood yesterday, when Papa got angry, you weren't scared. He considered how much truth to give her, settled on enough. The war. I was a soldier for 4 years. You learn things when your life depends on it. Did you kill people? Sarah! Elena's voice was sharp with shock, but Samuel shook his head. It's all right. She deserves an honest answer. He looked up at the girl, saw her watching him with those 2 old eyes. Yes, I did, and it's something I'll carry the rest of my life. War's not glorious or noble like the stories make it sound. It's ugly, and it breaks things inside you that don't always heal right. Do you have nightmares? Sometimes. Less now than I used to. Sarah nodded slowly, processing this. Mama had nightmares. After Emma was born and she got sick, she'd wake up screaming sometimes, and Papa would just leave the room like it was too much trouble to comfort her. The casual way she said it, like it was just a fact of life, made Samuel's chest ache. That must have been hard. For all of you. We managed. We always managed. But her voice wavered slightly. Until we didn't anymore. Elena reached up and squeezed the girl's ankle, a small gesture of comfort. Sarah didn't pull away. They walked on, and gradually the girls began to relax into the rhythm of the journey. Emma started asking questions about everything they passed. What kind of bird was that? Why was the grass so tall here? Did Samuel's horse have a name? He answered each one patiently, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tension started to drain from their small shoulders. By mid-morning, the first drops of rain began to fall. Samuel picked up the pace, and within an hour they crested a low rise and his cabin came into view. It sat in a shallow valley protected on three sides by gentle slopes, with a creek running along the eastern edge. The barn needed paint, and the corral fence had a few broken rails, but it was sound and solid and his. That's home, he said, and felt something strange saying the word with other people present. He'd lived alone for so long that home had just meant shelter, a place to sleep between work. Now, looking at it through their eyes, he saw how small it was, how rough. It's pretty, Emma said shyly. I like the trees. There were 3 cottonwoods near the creek, their leaves already showing yellow at the edges. Samuel had always meant to plant more, never gotten around to it. Now he was glad for the ones that were there, offering something green and growing to balance the starkness of the cabin. The rain picked up as they crossed the final stretch of prairie. By the time they reached the barn, it was coming down steady and cold. Samuel got the girls inside first, then helped Elena with their bundles while the horse shook itself dry in the stall. Go on to the cabin, he told Elena. Get them warm. I'll finish up here. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something, then nodded and shepherded the girls across the muddy yard. Samuel took his time with the horse, giving them space to adjust to the new surroundings without him hovering. When he finally made it inside, shaking rain from his hat, he found Elena standing in the middle of the single room, slowly turning in a circle. The girls sat on his bed, the only bed, clutching their mother's box and watching everything with wide eyes. It's small, Elena said softly. Yeah. He hadn't realized how small until now, seeing it with 4 people instead of 1. There's a loft. I can sleep up there, give you and the girls the bed. Samuel, we can't. You can and you will, at least until we figure something else out. He moved to the stove, started building a fire. There's a trunk in the corner with some blankets. Not fancy, but they're clean, and I've got beans and bacon if you're hungry. We're always hungry, Emma said matter-of-factly. That settled it. Samuel set about making a proper meal while Elena explored the small space, taking inventory of what they had to work with. There wasn't much. A table and 2 chairs he'd built himself, the trunk, a shelf with some basic supplies, hooks on the wall for clothes and tools. Everything a single man needed, and nothing more. We'll need more chairs, Elena said, thinking out loud, and probably another bed eventually, some way to divide the space so the girls have privacy. I can build what we need. Got lumber in the barn, and I'm handy enough with a hammer. She looked at him, and he saw her doing calculations in her head, figuring out how to make this work, how to turn his bachelor cabin into a home for 4 people who barely knew each other. One step at a time, he reminded her gently. Today we just rest and stay dry. Tomorrow, we can worry about the rest. The beans took an hour to cook properly. Samuel made cornbread to go with them, working from memory of how his mother used to do it. It came out a little dry, but the girls ate like they hadn't seen food in days, and Elena closed her eyes after the first bite like it was the finest meal she'd ever tasted. When's the last time you ate something hot? Samuel asked. I don't remember. She laughed, but there was no humor in it, Thomas didn't see the point in wasting firewood for cooking when cold food worked just as well. Jesus. Samuel pushed more cornbread toward the girls. Eat as much as you want. There's always more. They did, and watching them gradually relax, seeing color come back into their cheeks, Samuel felt something fierce and protective take root in his chest. These weren't his children. He had no claim on them, no real right to feel this way. But looking at Sarah carefully rationing Emma's portions to make sure her sister got enough, seeing the way they both instinctively flinched when he moved too quickly, he knew he'd fight anyone who tried to hurt them again. After they'd eaten, Elena heated water for washing. Samuel retreated to the barn to give them privacy, spent an hour doing unnecessary repairs while rain drummed on the roof. When he came back, the girls were clean and dressed in nightgowns that had been carefully mended, their hair braided back. They looked younger somehow, less like small soldiers and more like actual children. Elena had organized their few belongings in the trunk, hung some clothes on hooks, generally made the space feel less like a place where a man slept between work shifts. She'd found his spare blankets and made up a pallet for herself on the floor near the stove, insisting the girls needed the bed more than she did. "You're not sleeping on the floor," Samuel said. "Then where? We've had this argument already. The bed's big enough for 3 if you crowd. You and the girls take it. I'll take the loft." "Samuel?" "Elena." He used the same tone she'd used, firm but gentle. "I'm not arguing about this. You've been through hell, so have they. Take the damn bed." She opened her mouth to argue again, then seemed to think better of it. "Fine, but tomorrow we figure out something better." "Tomorrow," he agreed. The girls were asleep before full dark, exhausted by travel and emotion, and the simple fact of finally feeling safe enough to rest. Elena tucked them in with a tenderness that made Samuel's throat tight, then came to sit at the table where he was pretending to read a months-old newspaper. "They're good kids," she said quietly. "Scared and hurt, but good underneath it all." "They are. Credit to their mother, I'd guess. Sarah doesn't talk about her much. I think it hurts too much. Time helps. Not as much as people claim, but some." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain and the soft breathing from the bed. The storm had settled in for the night, and the cabin felt like a small, warm island in an ocean of darkness. "What happens now?" Elena asked finally. "Really? Not the hopeful version, the real one." Samuel set down the newspaper he hadn't been reading. "Really? Thomas could come after you, could bring the law, claim you kidnapped his children or broke your marriage vows. Kansas law is muddy on women's rights, and a lot of judges still think a wife's place is wherever her husband says it is." "That's what I thought." She didn't look surprised, just tired. "So I trade one cage for another, just waiting for him to show up." "Not necessarily. We could leave Kansas, head to Colorado or Wyoming, somewhere he won't think to look. Start over completely." "With what money? What prospects?" She gestured around the cabin. "Samuel, you have a life here. Land, animals, a reputation. I can't ask you to abandon that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Why?" The question came out raw. "Why would you do that? We had one summer together 18 years ago. That's not enough to build this kind of loyalty on." He thought about deflecting, about making it seem simpler than it was. But she'd asked for truth, and truth was what she deserved. "You remember the night by the creek? When you dared me to kiss you?" A small smile touched her lips. "I remember you were terrified. I was, but not of kissing you. I was terrified because I knew, even then, even at 16, that you were going to matter, that whatever we had wasn't just some summer romance I'd forget when fall came." He met her eyes across the table. "And I was right. 4 years of war didn't erase you. 15 years of trying to move on didn't work. You mattered then, and you matter now. That doesn't just disappear because time passed." "Samuel, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Not asking you to love me back or feel the same way or anything else. But I need you to understand, you're not a burden. Not to me. Having you here, the girls, all of it, it's not something I'm enduring. It's something I want." She was crying again, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "I don't know if I can be what you need. I'm broken in ways that might not fix." "Then you're broken. So am I. We'll figure it out together. She reached across the table and took his hand, held it like a lifeline. They sat like that while the rain continued and the fire burned low, not saying anything more because the important things had already been said. Eventually, Elena went to bed, carefully sliding in beside the girls without waking them. Samuel climbed the ladder to the loft, lay down on the narrow mattress he'd dragged up there years ago, and stared at the ceiling. He could hear them breathing below him. 3 lives he'd taken responsibility for on instinct and emotion, without fully thinking through the complications. What if Thomas did come? What if the law sided with him? What if Samuel's small savings ran out and he couldn't feed them all? What if? But beneath the worry was something else, something that felt almost like peace. His cabin wasn't empty anymore, wasn't just a place to sleep between work. It was home in a way it had never been before, filled with people who needed it to be. That was worth fighting for. He woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and for a moment he was disoriented, couldn't remember why his cabin smelled like breakfast instead of the usual nothing. Then he remembered, and everything clicked into place. He climbed down to find Elena at the stove, the girls sitting at the table with their hair still sleep mussed, and the whole scene so domestic it made his chest ache. "Morning," Elena said without turning around. "There's coffee if you want it." "You didn't have to cook." "I wanted to. Besides, if I'm staying here, I should earn my keep." "That's not—" He stopped himself. They could argue about obligations later. "Thank you. It smells good." Breakfast was bacon and eggs and more cornbread, better than yesterday's batch. The girls ate steadily, and Samuel noticed they didn't flinch as much when he moved. Small progress, but progress. After they'd eaten and cleaned up, Samuel sat down with Elena to make a plan. "First thing we need is more supplies," he said. "Clothes for the girls that fit properly, fabric for Elena to make more, food that'll stretch. My stores are good for 1, but not 4. "I can help with money." She pulled out the jar she'd taken from Thomas's cabin. "It's not much, but it's something." "Keep it. We might need it later if things get complicated." He pulled out his own small savings from a hidden spot in the wall. "This should cover what we need for now, but I'll have to sell a steer or 2 soon to keep us going." "I can work," Elena said. "Take in washing or sewing, something to bring in money." "We'll see. For now, let's just get settled." They spent the morning organizing the cabin into something that could accommodate 4 people. Samuel cleared space in the loft for storage, built a makeshift privacy screen from an old blanket and some rope, moved things around until everyone had at least a small corner they could call their own. The girls watched everything with quiet intensity, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just observing. Samuel got the sense they were waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this new situation to reveal itself as just another version of their old suffering. Around noon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Samuel saw him first, felt his whole body go tense. "Get inside," he told Elena quietly. "Take the girls to the loft." "Is it?" "I don't know. Just go." She didn't argue, just gathered the girls and disappeared into the cabin. Samuel stayed where he was, hand resting casually on the fence post, but every muscle ready to move. The rider came closer, and Samuel felt a mix of relief and new worry. Not Thomas, but not a stranger either. It was Deputy Marshal Henry Watts, a decent man Samuel had worked with during a land dispute 2 years back. He rode up slowly, hands visible, face carefully neutral. "Samuel," he said by way of greeting. "Henry, what brings you out here?" "You know what brings me." Henry dismounted, tied his horse to the fence. "Thomas Brennan came to town yesterday evening. Said his wife ran off with another man, took his daughters with her. Said the man in question was you." Samuel's jaw tightened. "That what he said?" "That's what he said. Also said he had it in writing that she seduced you under false pretenses." Henry pulled out a paper, unfolded it. "This look familiar?" It was the document Thomas had made Elena sign. Samuel read it over, felt his blood boil at the phrasing. Made it sound like Elena had planned the whole thing, like she was some kind of scheming temptress instead of a desperate woman escaping a bad situation. "Yeah, I've seen it. She signed it because Thomas wouldn't let her leave otherwise." "That's not what he claims." "Thomas claims a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." Henry sighed, looked toward the cabin where he could probably see curtains moving in the window. "Is she here?" The woman and the girls? She is. Samuel, you know I have to talk to her, get her side of things. And if she doesn't want to talk, then I still have to try. That's my job. Henry's voice was patient but firm. Look, I know you're a good man, fought for the Union, built this place from nothing, never caused trouble. But the law's the law. A woman can't just leave her legal husband, and she definitely can't take his children without it being complicated. Even if that husband was hurting her? Something flickered in Henry's expression. He hit her? Not exactly, but there's more than one way to hurt someone. She was working herself to death, the girls were terrified, and 2 nights before she left, he tried to force himself on her when she said she wasn't ready. Henry winced. She willing to testify to that? I don't know, but I'll ask her. He went to the cabin, found Elena standing rigid with fear, the girls behind her. Deputy Marshal's here. Says he needs to talk to you. I can try to send him away, but... No. Her voice was quiet but steady. I'll talk to him. Better to face it now than wait. She straightened her dress, smoothed her hair, then walked out like she was heading to her own execution. Samuel followed close behind. Henry took off his hat when he saw her, a small gesture of respect. Ma'am, I'm Deputy Marshal Henry Watts. I need to ask you some questions about your marriage to Thomas Brennan. Ask them. Did you leave him willingly, or were you coerced? I left willingly. Samuel didn't coerce me. I sent him a note asking for help, and he came. And the children? Mr. Brennan claims you kidnapped them. I took them because they weren't safe there, because their father ignored them, worked me past exhaustion, and made it clear he saw all of us as property, not people. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. It's the truth. Her voice didn't waver. I can give you details if you need them, dates, times, specific incidents, but the basic truth is simple. That cabin wasn't a home. It was a prison, and I did what I had to do to get us out. Henry studied her for a long moment. Mr. Brennan mentioned something about you refusing your marital duties. That true? Elena's face flushed, but she held his gaze. He came to the bedroom drunk and said it was time I paid what I owed him. I told him I wasn't ready, and he said it didn't matter, that I belonged to him now. I locked myself in the girls' room for safety. Is that what you mean by refusing? The deputy's expression hardened. Ma'am, I need to be clear here. Are you saying he attempted to force himself on you? I'm saying he made it very clear he would if I didn't comply. And I'm saying I had every reason to believe he meant it. Henry looked at Samuel, then back at Elena. This puts me in a difficult position. Legally, you're still his wife. Legally, those are still his children. I can't just ignore that. What are you saying? Samuel's voice went cold. You're taking them back? I'm saying I need to investigate properly. Talk to the girls, maybe ride out to Brennan's place and ask some questions. But in the meantime, he looked at Elena. You willing to stay here voluntarily while I sort this out? Or do I need to take you into protective custody? I'll stay. Elena's chin came up. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I did what I had to do, and I'll face whatever consequences come. Fair enough. Henry tucked his hat back on. I'll be back in a few days with a decision. In the meantime, Samuel, you're responsible for her. Anything happens, anyone gets hurt, it's on you. Understood. The deputy mounted his horse, then paused. For what it's worth, I believe you. Both of you. But belief doesn't always line up with the law. Just be prepared for this to get messy. Then he was gone, riding back toward town, leaving them standing in the yard with the weight of official scrutiny settling over everything. Elena sagged against the fence. He's going to make me go back. You don't know that. I know how the law works. Women have no rights. We're property of our fathers until we become property of our husbands. A deputy marshal isn't going to side with me over a legal husband. Henry's fair. He'll do right by you. Fair doesn't mean just. But she straightened again, visibly gathering strength. All right, if we only have a few days, we need to make them count. I want the girls to feel safe here. Want them to know what a real home feels like before whatever happens next. They spent the afternoon doing exactly that. Samuel showed the girls how to feed the chickens, let them collect eggs, and squeal with delight when one of the hens pecked at Emma's hand without real malice. Elena organized the cabin further, found ways to make it cozy despite its roughness. They cooked dinner together, all four of them crowded around the small stove, and it felt almost normal. That night, after the girls were asleep, Samuel and Elena sat outside on the porch he'd built last summer. The stars were out in force, competing with the quarter moon for brightness. "Thank you," Elena said quietly, "for standing with me today, for not running when things got legal and complicated." "Where would I run to? This is my home. You're here. That makes it worth fighting for." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that felt both familiar and new. "What if they make me go back? What if I have to choose between my freedom and keeping the girls safe? Then we figure out another way. Maybe we leave Kansas like I said. Maybe we fight it in court. Maybe, I don't know, Elena, but I do know giving up isn't an option. I'm tired of fighting. I know, but you're good at it. You've been fighting your whole life, to survive, to keep going, to make something from nothing. This is just one more battle." She turned to look at him, her face ghostly in the moonlight. "And after? If we win, if we survive this, what then? Then we build something real, something that lasts. The four of us, together, making a life that's actually worth living." "You make it sound simple." "It's not. It'll be hard and messy and probably break our hearts a few more times before we're through. But Elena, simple isn't what matters. What matters is choosing to try. Choosing each other. Choosing hope, even when the smart money's on despair." She kissed him then, soft and brief and full of promise. "I choose you," she whispered against his lips. "Whatever comes, however this ends, I choose you." And in that moment, with stars wheeling overhead and danger circling just beyond the firelight, Samuel knew they'd find a way. Not because it would be easy, not because the law was on their side, but because some things were worth fighting for, and this fragile, complicated, beautiful thing they were building was one of them. The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension between hope and dread. They fell into routines that felt both temporary and permanent, building a life while knowing it might be ripped away at any moment. Samuel taught the girls how to groom the horse, how to recognize the signs of weather changing, how to be still enough that the rabbits would come close. Elena cooked meals that stretched his supplies in ways he'd never imagined, turned his rough bachelor existence into something that felt like actual living. At night, after the girls slept, they talked. About Tennessee and the war, about the years between, about dreams they'd buried and ones that might still be possible. They didn't kiss again, both of them aware that building something real meant taking time, meant earning trust instead of demanding it. But they held hands across the table, and sometimes Elena would rest her head on his shoulder while they watched the sunset, and those small intimacies felt more significant than anything Samuel had experienced in years. Sarah started to thaw. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in small increments that added up. She smiled when Samuel made a joke about the chickens staging a rebellion. She asked him to teach her how to whittle, sat beside him on the porch for an hour working a piece of soft pine into something that might eventually resemble a bird. She stopped flinching quite so much when he moved suddenly. Emma was easier in some ways, harder in others. She attached herself to Elena with fierce devotion, following her everywhere, helping with every task. But she barely slept, and when she did, she woke crying for her mother. Samuel would hear Elena's soft voice in the night, singing lullabies that seemed to come from somewhere deep and old, and slowly Emma would quiet. On the third morning, Samuel woke to find Sarah already up, sitting on the porch steps and staring toward the road. "Expecting someone?" he asked, settling beside her with his coffee. "The marshal. He said a few days. It's been 3. Could be 4, could be 5. Henry's thorough. What happens if he says we have to go back?" Her voice was small, younger than her 8 years. Samuel chose his words carefully. "Then we fight it. Go to a judge, make our case, show them why staying here is better. And if the judge says no, then we figure out something else. Sarah, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to let you go back to a place where you're scared, where you're not safe. I'll do whatever it takes to prevent that. Even if it's against the law? He looked at her, this child who'd learned too early that the world didn't always protect the vulnerable, and decided she deserved complete honesty. Even then, some laws are wrong. Some laws hurt people instead of helping them. And when that happens, good people have an obligation to stand against them. She nodded slowly, processing this. My mother used to say that laws made by men don't always reflect what's right, that sometimes you have to follow your conscience instead. Your mother was a wise woman. She was lonely. Papa didn't talk to her much, even before she got sick. She'd tell us stories at night about a different life she'd imagined, a life where she mattered as more than just someone to cook and clean and bear children. Sarah's eyes were dry, but her voice trembled. I think she gave up. I think that's why she didn't fight harder to stay alive when Emma was born. She just didn't have any fight left. The casual devastation in those words nearly broke Samuel's heart. That's a heavy burden to carry, he said quietly, thinking your mother chose to leave you. I don't blame her. I understand. When you're tired enough, when nothing you do makes anything better, sometimes stopping seems like the only choice left. Sarah, listen to me. You're 8 years old. You shouldn't have to understand that. You shouldn't have to carry that kind of weight. But I do. She looked at him directly. And so does Emma. And so does Miss Elena. We're all carrying things that are too heavy. The question is whether we're strong enough to keep carrying them, or whether we're going to break. He wanted to promise her that they wouldn't break, that everything would be fine, that he'd protect them from all future harm. But she'd see through the lie, and she deserved better than false comfort. Maybe we don't have to carry them alone, he said instead. Maybe that's what family is. People who help shoulder the weight so no one person gets crushed by it. Is that what we are now? Family? I'd like to think so, if you're willing. She considered this for a long moment, then nodded. I think I'd like that too. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, and Samuel felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. These girls needed someone to fight for them, and he was damn well going to be that person, whatever it cost. Around noon, dust appeared on the horizon. Not one rider this time, but 3. Samuel felt his stomach drop. Get inside. Find Elena. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. Sarah's face went white, but she obeyed without argument. Samuel watched the riders approach, trying to make out faces. Henry Watts in front, that was certain. Behind him rode Thomas Brennan, sitting his horse like a man who expected the world to bend to his will. The third rider was unfamiliar. Older, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Probably the judge Henry had brought to make this official. They dismounted in the yard, and Samuel came down from the porch to meet them. Henry looked apologetic. Thomas looked triumphant. The older man just looked tired. Samuel, Henry said, this is Judge Morrison from Salina. He's here to resolve the situation. Judge, Samuel nodded respectfully, kept his voice level. Welcome to my home. Mr. Cross, Morrison had a dry, precise voice. Deputy Watts has explained the circumstances. I've also spoken at length with Mr. Brennan here about his version of events. Now, I need to speak with Mrs. Brennan and the children. She's inside with the girls. I'll get them. Actually, Thomas interrupted, I'd like to come in, see where my wife and daughters have been living, make sure they've been treated properly. Every instinct screamed at Samuel to refuse, but he knew that would only hurt their case. Fine, but you stay where I can see you. They walked to the cabin, Thomas looking around with barely concealed contempt. Samuel knew what he saw, the rough furniture, the cramped space, the poverty of it compared to his own established homestead. Knew how it would play in front of a judge. Elena stood when they entered, the girls pressed close behind her. She'd put on her best dress, pinned her hair up neatly, and her face showed nothing but calm determination. But Samuel saw the fear in her eyes, saw her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her skirts. Mrs. Brennan, Judge Morrison said, I'm Judge Morrison. I'm here to determine what's in the best interest of all parties involved. Are you willing to speak with me honestly? Yes, Your Honor. And the children, can they speak for themselves? Sarah stepped forward before Elena could answer. I can speak. Emma's too young, but I can tell you what we want. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Very well. But first, I'd like to speak with your father, alone. Mr. Cross, Mrs. Brennan, would you step outside with the children? Thomas started to protest, but the judge silenced him with a look. They filed out, leaving Thomas alone with Morrison and Deputy Watts. The door closed behind them. Elena paced the yard, her composure cracking now that she was out of sight. This is it. He's going to take them. Take all of us. You don't know that. Look at this place, Samuel. Look at what we're offering compared to what Thomas has. A judge isn't going to choose a poor cowboy's cabin over an established ranch. Maybe. Maybe not. But we tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. They waited 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Finally, the door opened and Morrison gestured them back inside. Thomas stood by the window, his face unreadable. Mrs. Brennan, the judge began, your husband claims you abandoned him without cause, that you were seduced by Mr. Cross here and left in violation of your marriage vows. What do you say to that? Elena's voice stayed steady. I say I left because staying was killing me. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly. Day by day, I was disappearing. The work was endless, the children were suffering, and when I tried to talk to my husband about it, he made it clear I was there to serve, not to be heard. Those are strong words. They're true words. Your Honor, I came to Kansas in good faith. I married Thomas Brennan believing we would build a life together. But within days, I realized he didn't want a wife. He wanted a housekeeper and a nanny he didn't have to pay. Someone to work herself to exhaustion while he pretended we didn't exist. Thomas's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Morrison turned to the girls. Sarah, is it? Your father says you were happy in his home, that you and your sister were well cared for. Is that accurate? Sarah looked at her father, then at the judge, then made her choice. No, sir. We were scared all the time. We had food and a bed, but we didn't have a father. We had someone who acted like we were furniture, things to be fed and ignored. That's a lie, Thomas said sharply. I worked to provide for them, kept a roof over their heads after their mother died. What more could they want? To matter, Sarah's voice rose. To feel like you cared if we lived or died. To have someone notice when we were sad or scared or hurting. Miss Elena did that in a week. You never did it once. The room went silent. Morrison looked at Thomas, at Sarah's fierce expression, at Elena's quiet dignity, and Samuel could see him weighing everything. Mr. Brennan, the judge said finally, you have a legal right to your wife and children. The law is clear on that. However, the law also recognizes that marriages and family situations can be detrimental to the welfare of those involved. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an honest answer. Do you want your wife back because you love her, or because you need her labor? Thomas's face flushed. That's not a fair question. It's an entirely fair question. Answer it. I married her in good faith. She owes me. That's not what I asked. Do you love her? The silence stretched out. Thomas looked at Elena, and Samuel saw something flicker in his expression. Not love, but maybe recognition. Maybe the admission that he'd never loved her, never even tried. No, he said finally. I don't love her. I needed help, and she needed security. That was the arrangement. And the children? Do you love them? Thomas looked at his daughters, and Samuel saw him struggle, saw him try to find the right answer, the one that would get him what he wanted. But Sarah stared back at him with those old eyes, and whatever lie he'd planned to tell died on his lips. They're my responsibility, my obligation. That's not love. Love doesn't put food on the table or keep a ranch running. Love is a luxury I can't afford. Morrison nodded slowly. Mrs. Brennan, do you wish to return to your husband? No, Your Honor. Not even if you order it. I see. And you, Mr. Cross, what's your interest in all this? Why involve yourself in another man's marriage? Samuel met the judge's eyes directly. Because I care about them. All three of them. Because I have the means to give them a safe home, and because standing by while people suffer when you can help is cowardice. You're aware that taking another man's wife, even with her consent, is legally problematic. I'm aware. I'm also aware that some laws need changing, that a woman shouldn't be trapped in a marriage that's destroying her just because a piece of paper says she belongs to someone. Careful, Mr. Cross. You're advocating for the dissolution of a legal marriage. I'm advocating for three people's right to live without fear. If that means dissolving a marriage, so be it. Morrison pulled out a notebook, made some notes. The scratching of his pen was the only sound in the room. Mr. Brennan, he said finally, I'm going to offer you a choice. You can insist on your legal rights. Force your wife to return, keep your daughters. I'll uphold that if you demand it, but if I do, I'll also order regular inspections of your home. I'll have Deputy Watts check in monthly, and if I hear even a whisper that you're mistreating any of them, I'll remove the children and prosecute you to the full extent of the law. Thomas's face darkened. You can't do that. I can and I will. That's option 1. Option 2 is you grant your wife an annulment on grounds of irreconcilable differences. You release all claim to the children, allow Mrs. Brennan to assume full guardianship. In return, she signs away any claim to your property or assets. You walk away clean, free to find another arrangement that suits you better. You're asking me to just give up my daughters? I'm asking you to be honest about whether you want them as daughters or as obligations. Which is it? The question hung in the air. Thomas looked at Sarah and Emma, and for a moment Samuel thought he might actually fight for them, might prove there was something human underneath all that bitterness and isolation. Then Thomas's shoulders slumped. Fine. The annulment. Let them go. I don't need the headache. Emma made a small sound, quickly stifled. Sarah's face showed nothing, but Samuel saw her hand tighten on Elena's. Are you certain? Morrison pressed. This is final. Once you sign, you have no legal claim on any of them. I'm certain. Draw up the papers. Morrison pulled out pre-prepared documents, clearly having anticipated this outcome. He walked Thomas through each page, had him sign and date. Then he turned to Elena. Mrs. Brennan, by signing this, you're accepting full legal responsibility for Sarah and Emma Brennan. You're also agreeing to relinquish any claim on Mr. Brennan's property, livestock, or assets. You'll leave the marriage with only what you brought into it. Do you understand and accept these terms? I do. She signed, her hand steady now. The judge witnessed both signatures, then handed one copy to Thomas and one to Elena. It's done. As of this moment, the marriage between Thomas Brennan and Elena Hale is dissolved. Mrs. Hale, you have full custody of Sarah and Emma. Mr. Brennan, you're free to go. Thomas stood there for a moment, looking at the paper in his hand like he couldn't quite believe what he'd done. Then he looked at his daughters one last time. You'll regret this, he said, but there was no heat in it, just a kind of tired resignation. All of you. Maybe, Elena said quietly, but it'll be our regret to carry. He nodded once, then walked out. They heard him mount his horse, heard the hoofbeats fade into distance, and then he was gone, and the cabin felt larger somehow, lighter. Morrison tucked his papers away. Mrs. Hale, I'll file these in Selena. You'll receive official copies within the week. In the meantime, I suggest you and Mr. Cross work out proper living arrangements. The law frowns on unmarried men and women cohabitating, particularly with children involved. We'll marry, Samuel said. The words came out before he'd thought them through, but he didn't take them back. Soon as it's legal. Elena turned to stare at him. Samuel? If you'll have me, he amended quickly. I'm not presuming, but if you're willing, I'd be honored to make this arrangement permanent. Morrison smiled slightly. I'd say that solves the problem. Deputy Watts can officiate if you'd like. Make it official before I leave town. Today? Elena's voice was faint. You want to marry me today? I've wanted to marry you for 18 years. Today's as good as any other day. Better even, since we've already got a judge and a deputy here as witnesses. He took her hands. But only if you want to. Only if you're ready. I'm not Thomas. I'm not going to demand or force. It's your choice. She looked at him, at the girls, at the cabin that had become their refuge. Then she started to laugh, slightly hysterical, but genuine. This is insane. This whole situation is completely insane. Probably. But is it a yes? Yes. It's a yes. Let's do this before I come to my senses and realize how reckless we're being. 20 minutes later, they stood in the yard with Sarah and Emma as witnesses, Judge Morrison reading from a small book he'd produced from his saddlebag. The ceremony was simple, no flowers or fancy words, just the essential promises. To love and honor, in sickness and health, for better or worse. When Morrison asked if she took Samuel to be her husband, Elena said yes without hesitation. When he asked Samuel the same question, Samuel looked at Elena and felt 18 years of grief and longing finally release their hold. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Kansas, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Cross. Samuel cupped Elena's face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, like she was something precious that might break. She kissed him back, and he tasted salt from her tears, felt her trembling slightly. When they pulled apart, Sarah was crying openly, and even Emma managed a watery smile. Morrison shook both their hands. Congratulations. I'll file the marriage certificate along with the annulment papers. You're legal now, all of you, a proper family in the eyes of the law. He and Deputy Watts mounted up to leave. Henry paused, leaned down to speak quietly to Samuel. You did good, both of you. Those girls needed someone to fight for them. Thanks for giving us the chance. Just take care of them. All of them. And Samuel, if you ever need anything, you let me know. Then they were gone, riding back toward town, leaving the four of them standing in the yard in stunned silence. Did we really just do that? Elena asked faintly. Did I really just marry you? Seems like it. I don't even know your middle name. James. Samuel James Cross. I'm Elena Marie Cross now. She tested the name, smiled slightly. It sounds right. It is right. He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. It's been right for 18 years. We just finally caught up with it. The girls approached hesitantly, and Elena pulled them into the embrace. They stood there, the four of them, holding each other in the Kansas sunlight, and Samuel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. That night, after the girls were asleep, Samuel and Elena sat on the porch again. But this time she wore his ring, a simple band he'd traded his best saddle for in town a year ago, thinking he'd never have use for it. This time when he took her hand, it wasn't temporary comfort. It was permanent. I'm scared, she admitted. Everything happened so fast. What if we made a mistake? Then we made it together, and we'll fix it together. What if I'm not a good enough mother to those girls? You already are. You already see them, care about them, fight for them. That's what matters. What if I can't be a good wife to you? What if I'm too broken from everything that happened? He turned to face her fully. Elena, listen to me. I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to have all the answers or never be scared or always know what to do. I just need you to be here, to be honest with me, to let me help carry what you're carrying. That's all marriage is. Two people choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. You make it sound simple. It's not. It'll be the hardest thing either of us ever does. Harder than war, harder than surviving alone, harder than anything. But Elena, I'd rather do hard things with you than easy things alone. She leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence while the stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere out there, Thomas Brennan was riding back to his empty cabin. Somewhere the world kept turning with all its cruelty and injustice and pain. But here, on this porch, four people who'd been broken had found each other and chosen to try, chosen to build something from their shared wreckage, chosen hope over despair, connection over isolation, love over fear. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was theirs, and that made it worth everything. Samuel? Elena's voice was soft in the darkness. Yeah? Thank you for coming that day, for believing me, for standing with me even when it cost you. Thank you for asking, for trusting me, for giving me a second chance I thought I'd lost forever. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her again, deeper this time, with all the feeling he'd stored up for 18 years. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she smiled against his lips. I think I'm going to like being married to you. I think I'm going to like being married to you, too. They sat there until the moon set, talking about plans for the cabin, for the girls, for the life they were going to build. Not fantasizing, just planning. Practical things like adding another room, teaching the girls to read properly, planting a garden in the spring. Small dreams, maybe. But they were theirs, and they were real, and after so many years of surviving, that felt like everything. The first week of their marriage passed in a blur of adjustment and small revelations. Samuel learned that Elena sang while she cooked, old ballads from Tennessee that made the cabin feel less empty. Elena discovered that Samuel talked to the horses like they were people, carrying on full conversations about weather and work while he groomed them. The girls learned that family meals could happen without tension, that laughter was allowed, that mistakes didn't bring punishment. It wasn't perfect. Emma still woke crying most nights, and Sarah still flinched when voices rose even in joy. Elena sometimes stared into space with haunted eyes, and Samuel occasionally woke reaching for weapons that weren't there, fighting battles that had ended 15 years ago. But they were gentle with each other's broken places, patient with the healing that came in fits and starts. Samuel started building the addition to the cabin on the third day. Just one room for now, small but sturdy, with a window facing east so the girls could wake to sunlight. He worked in the evenings after ranch chores, and Sarah took to sitting beside him, handing him nails and asking questions about how things fit together. "Why'd you decide to build in Kansas?" she asked one afternoon, watching him measure boards. "When you could have gone anywhere after the war." He paused, considering. "Honestly, I was running. From memories, from Tennessee, from everything that reminded me of what I'd lost. Kansas felt far enough away to start over." Did it work? "For a while. I built this place, got the land producing, convinced myself I was content. But content isn't the same as happy. Took your new mama showing up for me to understand the difference." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Mama, my real mama, would be glad we're here with you and Miss Elena?" "I think any mother who loved her daughters the way yours clearly did would want them safe and happy. And if that means being here, then yes, I think she'd be glad." "I wish I could ask her. Wish I could tell her we're okay now." Samuel set down his hammer. "You know what I think? I think she knows. Maybe not in some magical way, but in the way that love keeps existing even after people are gone. She loved you enough to fight for you when she was alive. That love doesn't just disappear." Sarah nodded slowly, then picked up a nail and handed it to him. They worked in comfortable silence after that, the sound of hammering carrying across the prairie. Inside, Elena was teaching Emma to read. They sat at the table with Samuel's one book, a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe he'd bought off a traveling peddler, and Elena pointed to words while Emma sounded them out with fierce concentration. "Ship," Emma said carefully. "The ship sailed. Perfect. You're getting so good at this." "Will I be able to read whole books someday, like Sarah?" "Absolutely. And then you can read to me, and I'll get to rest my voice." Emma giggled, a sound that was becoming more frequent. "Miss Elena?" "What is it, sweetheart?" "Are you going to leave us, like Mama did?" Elena's heart clenched. She set down the book and pulled Emma into her lap. "Oh, honey, no, I'm not going anywhere. Your mama didn't want to leave you. Sometimes bodies just give out, and there's nothing anyone can do. But I'm healthy, and I'm here, and I'm choosing to stay. Every single day, I'm choosing you. Promise?" "I promise." "You're stuck with me now." Emma wrapped her arms around Elena's neck and held on tight. Over the child's shoulder, Elena caught Samuel's eye through the window. He was watching them, hammer forgotten in his hand, and the expression on his face made her throat tight. Love. That's what that expression was. Pure and uncomplicated and real. She mouthed the words, "I love you," through the glass, saw him smile, and mouthed them back. 2 weeks in, they had their first real fight. It started over something small. Elena had sold 2 of Samuel's chickens to a passing farmer to buy fabric for new dresses for the girls. She'd thought she was being practical, making do with what they had. Samuel came home to find the chickens gone and exploded. "You can't just sell my livestock without asking. They were old hens that barely laid anymore. I got a good price, and the girls need clothes that actually fit. That's not the point. This is my ranch, my—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Elena's face went cold. Your ranch, I see. So what am I then? Just another mouth to feed? Another obligation? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Samuel? Because it sure sounded like you were saying I have no say in decisions around here. I'm saying you should have asked. Talk to me. We're supposed to be partners. Partners discuss things, yes. They don't require permission like children asking their father. The girls had gone quiet in the corner, and Samuel saw fear creeping back into their faces. He forced himself to take a breath, lower his voice. You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. And I should have told you about the chickens. I'm so used to having to manage on my own, make decisions quickly because there's no one to consult. I forgot that's not how it works anymore. They stood there, both of them wound tight with unexpressed fear. Because the fight wasn't really about chickens. It was about trust and partnership and the terror of repeating old patterns. I'm not Thomas, Samuel said quietly. I don't want a servant or someone who lives in fear of displeasing me. I want a wife, a real partner. But Elena, that means we have to talk to each other. Really talk. I know. And I'm not trying to undermine you or take over. I'm just trying to figure out how to be married to someone who actually wants my input instead of my silence. He crossed to her, took her hands. Then let's figure it out together. Let's make a rule. Big decisions, we discuss. Both of us. No assumptions, no doing things without talking first. That seems fair. And Samuel, I'm sorry I sold your chickens without asking. I'm sorry I yelled, and for the record, you were right. They were old hens, and the girls do need new dresses. She leaned into him, and he held her close. Over her shoulder, he saw Sarah and Emma watching with wide eyes, and he realized this moment mattered. Not the fight, but what came after. They were learning that disagreement didn't mean disaster, that people could get angry and still choose each other. Come here, girls, Elena said, reading his mind. Let's all talk about this. They came hesitantly, and Samuel crouched down to their level. What you just saw, Elena and me fighting, that probably scared you, made you think we were like your father, that someone was going to get hurt. Sarah nodded cautiously. But did anyone get hurt? Did anyone hit or threaten or say cruel things meant to wound? No, Emma whispered. That's because sometimes people who love each other disagree. Sometimes they get frustrated or angry, but in a good family, in a safe family, that anger doesn't turn into violence or cruelty. It just turns into conversation, into figuring out how to do better next time. So, you're not mad at Miss Elena? Sarah asked. I was. For about 5 minutes. Now I'm just sorry I yelled and grateful she's patient enough to work through it with me. And you're not mad at Mr. Samuel? Emma directed this at Elena. Same answer. Mad for a few minutes, grateful afterward that he cares enough to talk instead of just staying angry. The girls seemed to relax slightly, and Samuel made a mental note to be more careful about their fights in the future. Not to hide them, the girls needed to see healthy conflict resolution, but to be mindful of how much their past still haunted them. That night, after the girls were asleep, Elena found Samuel on the porch. I've been thinking about what you said, about being partners. Yeah? I want that, really want it. But Samuel, I don't know how. I spent my whole childhood watching my mother defer to my father on everything. Then I spent 6 days with Thomas learning that wives who speak up get punished. I don't have a model for what equal partnership looks like. Neither do I, if I'm honest. My parents barely spoke to each other. And I've been alone so long I've forgotten how to consider someone else in my decisions. He took her hand. So we'll learn together. We'll make mistakes and fix them and probably make the same mistakes again before we get it right. That's terrifying. Yeah, but it's also kind of exciting. We get to build something new, something that works for us instead of following someone else's rules. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I like that. Building something new. They sat in comfortable silence, and Samuel felt gratitude wash over him. Not for the fight, that had been unpleasant and necessary, but for what came after. The willingness to be honest, to be vulnerable, to choose each other even when it was hard. A month in, they hit their first real crisis. Sarah came down with a fever that spiked so high she became delirious. Elena sat beside her bed for 2 days straight, cooling her with wet cloths and forcing water down her throat. Samuel rode to town for medicine the doctor recommended, came back to find Emma also starting to show symptoms. It's spreading, Elena said, her voice tight with fear. What if it's cholera? What if I lose them the way I lost my family? It's not cholera. Doc says it's just a bad fever, common this time of year. They'll be okay. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. And we're going to fight like hell to make it true. They took turns sitting with the girls, sleeping in shifts, forcing fluids and medicine at regular intervals. Samuel had never felt so helpless. He could build things, fix things, fight things. But he couldn't fight illness, couldn't force their small bodies to heal through will alone. On the third night, Sarah's fever broke. She woke asking for water, her eyes clear for the first time in days. Elena sobbed with relief and held her close. Emma's fever lasted 2 more days. There were moments when Samuel thought they'd lose her, when her breathing got shallow and her skin burned so hot it hurt to touch. Elena refused to leave her side, refused to sleep or eat properly, wearing herself down to nothing. You have to rest, Samuel told her. You'll get sick too if you keep this up. I can't. If I stop watching her, if I look away for even a moment, then I'll watch her. I'll sit right here and I won't move. But Elena, you need sleep. She let him guide her to the bed, and she was asleep before her head hit the pillow. Samuel took up the vigil, talking to Emma in soft tones even though she couldn't hear him. You fight this, little one. You fight hard. Your sister needs you. Your mama needs you. And I need you even though I've only known you a month. You're part of this family now, and we don't give up on family. Near dawn, Emma's fever broke. She opened her eyes, looked at Samuel with confusion, then smiled slightly. You stayed. Of course I stayed. Where else would I be? Papa never stayed when we were sick. Said illness was women's work. Samuel felt familiar rage toward Thomas Brennan, but pushed it down. Well, I'm not your papa, and in this family, when someone's sick, we all help. That's just how it works. I like this family better. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. When Elena woke hours later, she found both girls sleeping peacefully, and Samuel slumped in the chair beside them. She kissed his forehead, and he stirred. They're okay, he mumbled. Fevers broke. Doc was right. You stayed up all night. Someone had to, and you needed sleep. She pulled him to his feet, led him to bed. He protested weakly, but she was insistent. My turn to watch. You've done enough. He fell asleep instantly, and Elena sat with the girls and let herself finally believe they'd survived, that her family was going to be okay. The illness took a toll. The girls were weak for weeks afterward, and money got tighter as medical bills piled up. Samuel sold a steer earlier than he'd planned, took on extra work helping a neighbor repair his barn. Elena started taking in mending from town, staying up late by lamplight to earn extra money. They didn't talk about how close to the edge they were, but they both felt it. One more crisis, one more expense, and they'd be in real trouble. The solution came from an unexpected source. Deputy Marshal Watts rode out one afternoon with news. A rancher north of Salina was looking for someone to manage a satellite property he'd acquired. Good pay, good land, and he'd heard Samuel was reliable. It would mean moving, Henry said, leaving this place. But the cabin that comes with it is bigger, the land's better, and the pay would be enough to support your family properly, maybe even save a little. Samuel and Elena talked it over that night. Leaving felt like failure, like admitting this place wasn't enough, but staying meant continuing to scrape by, meant putting the girls at risk if another emergency hit. What do you want to do? Elena asked. I want to provide for you, for all of you. If that means swallowing my pride and taking a job working someone else's land instead of my own, then that's what I'll do. But this is your home. You built it yourself. Home isn't a building, it's people. And my people can live anywhere. They took the job, spent a week packing up their lives, saying goodbye to the cabin that had sheltered them through so much. Samuel sold his land to a young couple just starting out, used the money to buy supplies for the new place. The move happened on a crisp October morning. They loaded everything into a borrowed wagon, and Samuel took one last look at the cabin before climbing up beside Elena. Any regrets? She asked. About leaving? No. About everything that led here? Not a single one. The new place was everything Henry had promised. A solid 2-bedroom cabin with glass windows and a real wood floor. a barn that didn't leak, land that had been well maintained and was ready to produce. The owner, a man named Crawford, was fair and direct. I need someone I can trust to run this place while I focus on my main ranch. You do that. You'll have work for as long as you want it. Abuse the trust and you're gone. We clear. Crystal clear. They settled in quickly. The girls got their own room, decorated it with wildflowers and drawings. Elena planted a garden that first week, putting in winter vegetables and planning for spring. Samuel learned the land, met the neighbors, started building relationships that would sustain them. One evening, about a month after the move, Sarah came to find Samuel in the barn. Can I ask you something? Always. Why do you work so hard? Mr. Crawford pays you whether you fix every fence or not, but you're out here until dark most nights, making sure everything's perfect. Samuel set down the bridle he was mending. Because this is our life now, our family's future. And I learned a long time ago that you can't control much in this world, but you can control the quality of your work, the effort you put in. I want you and Emma to see that, to understand that how you do things matters. Is that why you're building the bookshelf, even though we only have one book? He smiled. We'll have more books, and when we do, we'll have a place for them. That's called planning for the future, believing that things can get better. Do you really believe that? That things get better? He looked at her directly. 6 months ago, I was alone in a cabin, convinced I'd spend the rest of my life that way. Now I have a wife I love, 2 daughters I'd die for, and work that means something. So yes, Sarah, I believe things can get better. Not always, not easily, but if you keep trying, keep choosing hope, eventually the world starts cooperating. She hugged him then, sudden and fierce. He held her close, this child who'd seen too much pain, but was slowly learning to trust joy. Winter came hard that year. Snow piled up in drifts taller than Samuel, and the wind cut through everything. But inside, the cabin stayed warm. They spent long evenings together, Elena teaching the girls to read more complex texts, Samuel teaching them chess on a board he'd carved. They told stories, sang songs, built the kind of memories that would last. On Christmas Eve, Samuel gave Elena a present he'd been working on for months, a wooden box, small and perfect, with her initials carved into the lid. For your memories, he said, things you want to keep safe. Inside, she found something that made her eyes fill with tears. The letters. All of them. Every letter she'd written to him during the war that had never reached him, retrieved from her father's house after his death. Her mother had saved them, hidden them away, and they'd been found among her belongings after the cholera took her. How did you? I wrote to your mother's sister in Chattanooga, asked if there was anything of yours that survived. She sent these. Elena opened one at random, read her 17-year-old self's words about waiting for him, believing in him, planning their future. Tears streamed down her face. I thought they were gone forever. I know, but they're here now. Physical proof that what we had was real, that you fought for us even when it seemed hopeless. She kissed him, salt tears mingling between them. Thank you, it's everything. The girls gave them a present too, a drawing they'd worked on together, showing all 4 of them in front of the cabin, holding hands, smiling. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was full of love and hope, and the belief that they belonged together. Samuel hung it above the fireplace, and it stayed there for the rest of their lives. Spring brought new challenges. The ranch work intensified, and Samuel was gone long hours. Emma started school in town, coming home with stories about friends and lessons. Sarah helped Elena in the garden, and they talked about everything. The past, the future, the complicated feelings that came with loving people who'd hurt you. Do you think Papa ever thinks about us? Sarah asked one afternoon while they weeded. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Probably not the way you'd want him to. I don't hate him. Is that wrong? After everything he did, everything he didn't do, I should hate him, but I just feel sad for him. That's not wrong. That's compassion. It's seeing that hurt people often hurt other people and feeling sorry for whatever broke him in the first place. Miss Elena? Yes? I'm glad you came to Kansas. Even though it was for the wrong reasons, even though you were supposed to marry him, I'm glad. Because otherwise we wouldn't have found you and Mr. Samuel. Elena pulled her into a hug. I'm glad too. So glad. That summer, Sarah turned 9 and Emma 7. They had a party with neighbors' children, cake that Elena made from scratch, presents that were small but meaningful. Samuel watched them laugh and play, saw how much they'd grown and changed in less than a year, and felt gratitude so intense it hurt. In the fall, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified, kept remembering Sarah's mother, how childbirth had killed her. Samuel found her crying in the garden one afternoon and held her until the fear subsided enough for words. "What if something goes wrong? What if I die and leave you alone with 3 children? Then I'll raise them and love them and make sure they know how much their mother loved them. But Elena, you're strong, healthy, and we'll get the best doctor. Take every precaution. You're not going to die." "You can't know that." "No, but I can believe it, and I can be here, every step of the way, making sure you have what you need." The pregnancy was difficult. Elena was sick for months, could barely keep food down. The girls stepped up without being asked, taking over cooking and cleaning, reading to her when she was too tired to move. Samuel worked shorter days, came home earlier, refused to leave her alone longer than necessary. In late spring, Elena went into labor. It lasted 14 hours, brutal and exhausting. Samuel held her hand through all of it, let her scream and curse and squeeze his fingers until they went numb. The doctor worked calmly, and finally, as dawn broke, a baby's cry filled the cabin. A son, perfect and healthy, and furious at being born. Elena held him and wept. Samuel kissed her forehead and whispered that she'd done it. She'd survived. They had a son. The girls met their new brother with awe and immediate devotion. Sarah held him carefully, like he was made of glass. Emma kissed his tiny fingers and declared him the most beautiful baby ever born. They named him James, after Samuel's middle name and Elena's brother, who died in the cholera epidemic. James Cross, born into a family that had been forged from loss and survival, bound together by choice rather than blood. The years that followed weren't easy. There were crop failures and illnesses, arguments and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and fear. Samuel's war nightmares came back for a while after James was born, and Elena had to help him through dark spells where the past felt more real than the present. The girls struggled sometimes with feeling caught between 2 fathers, 2 identities, 2 versions of themselves. But they worked through it. They talked and fought and forgave and tried again. They built a life that wasn't perfect but was theirs, earned through effort and sustained by love. Sarah grew into a thoughtful young woman who became a teacher, using what she'd learned about pain and resilience to help other children who were struggling. Emma became a seamstress with her own shop, creating beautiful things and supporting herself with skills Elena had taught her. James grew up never knowing hunger or fear, secure in a family that chose each other every day. Samuel and Elena grew old together, their hands weathered and marked by work, their faces lined with years, but their love only deepened. They sat on their porch on summer evenings, watching grandchildren play in the yard, and marveled at how far they'd come from that day at the depot. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come?" Elena asked one evening, her head on his shoulder. "If I'd stayed with Thomas?" "Sometimes, but not for long, because thinking about that version of the world, where we didn't find each other again, it's too painful. We were lucky." "We were, but we also chose each other. Every day, in 100 small ways, we kept choosing. That wasn't luck. That was work. The best work I've ever done." He kissed her temple. "Same here." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. The same prairie that had witnessed their reunion, their struggles, their triumph. The same land that had tested them and shaped them and ultimately gave them a home. Sarah came out to join them, now 32, with children of her own. "Emma sent word she's coming for harvest this year, bringing the whole family." "That'll be crowded," Samuel said mildly. "That'll be wonderful," Elena corrected. Sarah smiled. "I was thinking about Papa the other day. Thomas, I mean. Wondering if he's still alive, if he ever remarried, if he ever regretted letting us go." "Do you want to know?" Samuel asked carefully. "No, not really. Because it doesn't matter anymore. He's part of my story, but he's not my father. Not in the ways that count." She looked at Samuel. "You're my father. You're the one who showed up, who stayed, who loved us even when we were difficult and broken and scared. Samuel's eyes filled. You were never difficult, and everyone's a little broken. It's what you do with the broken pieces that matters. You taught us that, both of you. She hugged them both, then went back inside. Elena wiped her own eyes. That girl. She's going to make me cry. She already did. They laughed, and the sound carried across the prairie, mixing with children's laughter and the wind in the grass and all the small sounds of a life well lived. That night, lying in bed beside his wife of 25 years, Samuel thought about everything that had led them here, the war that had separated them, the lies that had kept them apart, the desperate note that had brought them back together, the choices they'd made over and over to choose love over fear, hope over despair, each other over easier paths. Elena? He whispered into the darkness. Thank you for stepping off that train. She turned to face him, even in the dark, finding his hand with perfect accuracy born of years of practice. Thank you for being there to see me do it. I love you. Have loved you since I was 16 and will love you until I die. I love you too. More than I thought possible. More than I have words for. They fell asleep like that, hands linked, hearts aligned, two people who'd been given a second chance and had the courage to take it. Years later, when they were both gone and their children and grandchildren gathered to remember them, the story they told was this one. The story of two people who loved each other across 18 years and 1,000 miles of heartbreak, who found each other again when hope seemed lost, who built a family from broken pieces and taught everyone around them that love, real love, was worth fighting for. The story of Samuel and Elena Cross, who proved that sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that come easy. They're the ones you have to fight for, bleed for, choose every single day until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. And in the end, isn't that what all the best love stories are? Not fairy tales where everything works out perfectly, but real stories about real people who loved each other enough to keep trying, keep choosing, keep building something beautiful from the wreckage of what came before. That's the legacy they left. Not land or money or possessions, but the knowledge that love endures. That family is what you make it. That second chances are real if you're brave enough to take them. And that sometimes, against all odds, destiny doesn't just reunite people. It waits until they're strong enough to choose each other freely. The moment at the depot didn't end a story. It finally began one worth keeping.